Today's episode is with Apoorvaa Deshpande.
I feel a privacy engineer should be a technical advocate for an organization, proactive approach towards privacy, that it shouldn't be an afterthought, but it is something that you should. Privacy is a feature, and it's think of it as a product feature because we decide that we want to compute this function on data. Let's say LLMs are known to memorize training data verbatim and then progressing, and it is at a stage where it is feasible but not scalable. How can we be convinced that we are really talking to the right person, right? So we need to empower people that yes, digital privacy is not only possible, it's your right, and you want to have a proactive approach, or rather you should have a proactive approach.
Hi everyone, this is Purushottam and thanks for tuning into Scale to Zero podcast. Today's episode is with Apoorvaa Deshpande. Apoorvaa is a senior privacy engineer at Google Cloud working on privacy design, analysis, and data governance for Gen AI products. Prior to that, she was a tech lead at Snap Inc. with a focus on unlocking utility for feature teams while maintaining a high privacy bar. Along with privacy reviews and analysis, she led the design and execution of several innovative privacy enhancing technologies, products at Snap. And prior to that, she completed her PhD in computer science in cryptography from Brown University. Apurva, thank you so much for taking the time and joining with us for the podcast.
No, thank you for having me, Purushottam. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So before we kick off, anything else you want to add to your journey? Like what motivated you to get into privacy engineering, or how did you get into privacy engineering? If you want to highlight that.
Yeah, that's actually a fun story. I mean, I was close to my graduation. I was finishing up my PhD, and I was thinking of what's next for me. Academia was definitely on the table, right? I was considering a few postdoc offers as well. But I was also curious about industry and how cryptography is works in action, kind of in real
Hmm.
world. And so for that, I attended this conference called Real World Crypto, which, as the name suggests, is about how cryptography is applied in industry in real world. And so there, I attended this talk by Snapchat, by my then future manager, about privacy engineering, about end-to-end encryption, in fact. And that was kind of fascinating. That opened up a new world for me, and I really was it was a new world that cryptography can be applied in such ways in industry, and these are such
Hmm.
interesting problems at scale. So yeah, that was kind of how I got connected with the team at Snap, and I ended up choosing to go there after my PhD. So, and now in hindsight, like privacy engineering has been such a good fit for what I love, and also what I'm good at in terms of expertise.
Yeah, that's definitely like a unique story, right? Where generally, when it comes to cryptography, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe encryption and things like that. How do you map it to privacy, uh, data privacy, user privacy, and things like that? And then making that jump, right? Leap of faith that, hey, yeah, maybe cryptography can be utilized in a better way in privacy as well. And I guess that after hearing the talk, that motivated you to get into that field, and you have been loving it, it seems. So now let's say like you have been working in the privacy engineering space for a while. What does your day-to-day life look like?
Typically, the things I do vary a lot, but I would say they fall mainly into four major buckets, I would say. And this is from my experience both at Snap and Google. So, one of the main buckets I would say is privacy reviews and analysis. So, like, understanding products and features deeply, and how they are affecting privacy, what are the components to it in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the data flow, and then kind of thinking deeply about what are the different surfaces, what could go wrong, so that attack or that having that mindset, that's one component. The second is, then once you identify what could go wrong, then how do we fix it, what are the solutions? And that's kind of also, I would say, the most interesting bit to me. How can we solve those problems using some of the privacy techniques like cryptography? So that's where I get to use my research background and
Mm-hmm.
also learning more. And then again, the exciting part there is to then have new proposals, innovations, and then I've worked on a couple of patents and papers at Snap as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the second bucket, problem solving. And then the third is related. Once you have that problem, a solution, how do you execute on that? How do you design, architect, build, with the right teams? How to take that collaboration forward? And the fourth, I would say, is more communication, because privacy is such a cross-functional activity that writing, articulating your thoughts well, whether it's your proposals or your analysis, design docs, and a heavy part of it is also just cross-functional meetings and alignment. So
I think communication plays a major role for every engineer's like life, right? Especially in case of privacy, I can imagine touching every part of the organization, right? Like if you have a user-facing app, then it's the user experience, your data. Then there are legal aspects, things like that. Though you have to work across different teams, so like communication has to be one of the like primary skills, right, that you would need. So yeah, totally, that makes
especially,
sense.
and privacy engineer kind of is in between all of these, right?
Exactly.
They are almost playing a role of first understanding the requirements from the product and engineering, what are we trying to do, then kind of understanding the legal perspective there, then
Hmm.
then being that, bringing that user privacy perspective, and then using all this to actually define the solution space, and then define the problem space, and then coming
Hmm.
up with a solution. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. So for today, I hope we can touch on some of these areas. So today we'll be focusing primarily on privacy engineering and privacy enhancing technologies. One thing that I want to ask before we get into some of these questions is, do you call it like PATs or pets? How do you call them?
pets, yeah, pets is yeah, how they
Okay.
are usually referred to. Yeah, so we could use
Okay.
that.
So I'll also, yeah, refer that during the recording. So to begin with, so there is a growing trend of privacy being one of the fundamental parts of system design. Let's say some examples I can take is, let's say Google's privacy first redesigns across the product suite, or Apple's design initiatives where they give access to control to the users over location or data sharing, and several other aspects of privacy, particularly in the Gen AI era we are in. There are so many more examples. But before we dive into some of these, maybe let's start with some of the fundamentals. Like, uh, not many folks are familiar with privacy engineering. So, can you help our audience understand when someone says privacy engineering, what does it mean?
Yeah, I there are a couple of definitions around privacy engineering, and of course they have a lot in common. But the definition that I like, or I personally go by, is I feel a privacy engineer should be a technical advocate for an organization for
Hmm.
their end users' privacy. So a technical advocate within an organization for the organization's end users. And so privacy engineering, in turn, I feel, is systems and processes that enable this advocacy, right? And so let's understand what I mean by advocacy, right? So for
Hmm.
advocacy, or advocacy of user privacy is basically how user data is treated, how the interactions with the users are treated inside the organization, how the data is collected and used. So then that goes back to what I described in terms of the day to day, right? That first is about understanding and reviewing features, understanding the attack surfaces. That's a major component of privacy engineering. Then having, in terms of the systems, it's also having the right annotations and labeling for
Hmm.
data. Then, if you want to have a proactive approach, or rather, you should have a proactive approach, which can include red teaming to some extent, what could go wrong in terms of user data and the privacy. Then, as we talked about, what how do we solve for this if there are some issues, or if we want to uh, use data in a privacy safe way or in a way that respects users' privacy, uh, then pets is an option
Hmm.
that we'll talk about. So thinking about that, or having the infrastructure to design those solutions, that's part of privacy engineering. The other systems and processes involve having a mechanism or tooling to do these reviews, analysis, uh, having infrastructure for you know problems that keep recurring, let's say deletion at scale, or some libraries, pets libraries, that might be needed often to solve problem statements. Then yeah, having basically having that, uh, uh, you know also the set of advocates or other allies within the organization who understand the importance of privacy and keep that in mind when they are doing their work. So
Hmm.
that's how I think of privacy engineering uh, as it has evolved now. And from a
Yeah.
user standpoint, it's more about uh, how privacy engineering is about thinking about whether we are being transparent to users, whether users are understanding well how their data is used or processed, whether they have enough agency, choice, control over their data. So,
I love how you highlighted that what organizations and within the organizations how you work with different teams, you have advocates for privacy, and also from a user's perspective, what should be my expectation from an organization that they're when it comes to my own data, right?
right.
Now you highlighted some tooling and libraries. Do you have any examples that you can share, like what type of tooling may be used by privacy engineers, or what type of libraries may be used by privacy engineers?
I mean, it varies across the organizations, but most organizations, at least fairly mature ones, have some you know tooling to manage the review process, whether it's something like Jira or internal bug tracking, ticket tracking systems, and then
Hmm.
have a specific uh, documentation format for engineering designs, and then the review notes, and
Okay.
then kind of to record that, okay, this design, these features have been approved by the privacy engineering team and legal. So kind of to manage that workflow, most places have some tooling now. It could be custom, or I know there are some standard uh, standard tooling by some companies that also people do opt for.
Okay.
Because privacy reviews are typically blocking, meaning,
Yes.
yeah, so those the features, there has to be documentation or paper trail that this feature, this has been approved both by engineering and legal. So
Right.
typically we need a formal way of recording all that.
Hmm. So, like, when it comes to engineering and security, often folks look at security also as a uh, even though it's an enabling function, very similar to privacy, it's seen as a blocking function, right? In a way, and privacy takes it to the next level where it has to be reviewed not just by security leadership, but also like privacy leadership, but also there is legal aspects which come into picture, right? So similar to like privacy engineering, there are some additional concepts which often are used interchangeably, even though maybe they mean different things, like things like privacy by design or privacy by default. Do you see them as the same thing, or do you see them as different things, and how are they related to each other?
Yeah, so privacy by design is essentially a framework that I feel privacy engineering is it trying to implement within an organization, right? So, privacy by design, the framework is essentially about embedding privacy into the complete product development life cycle and basically keeping a very proactive approach towards privacy, that it shouldn't be an afterthought, but it is something that you should organizations and engineers should be thinking about at every step, right from the conception of a feature, and then having that embedded in the design. So that's one key aspect of privacy by design framework. Then the second, as I mentioned, right, being responsible stewards of user data. So the analogy I like to think about is it's it's as though a friend has trusted you with their a secret or something,
Hmm.
sensitive piece of data. So
Yeah.
that's how we should be thinking about user data, and treating it with respect and using it very responsibly, using it only for what you said you will use it, deleting it afterwards, and communicating that clearly to users. So this is all part of privacy by design. The other very interesting aspect, which we were just touching upon, is uh, privacy by design talks about this positive sum or win-win approach, right? So
Hmm.
when I mentioned that privacy reviews are blocking it, what I meant was it's more that the approval has to happen before the feature is launched. But in general, I know that privacy or security can be mm, looked at as overall blockers, but the framework itself encourages everyone to think of privacy, or overall think of what is a win-win approach, right? Not look at user privacy in silo. And this is something I also truly believe in, and that's what I have followed personally. I don't believe in saying no to teams, or how this is not a good idea. Sometimes it is not, but then it is my job as a privacy engineer to come up with a solution to find something that works for everyone.
Yeah, and I think I can see a lot of parallels with security also. Like security leaders also are seen as a team of no, but
Hmm.
at the end of the day, they are trying to ensure that whatever engineers are building are secure, right? And they are enabling you to maybe write better code or write secure code. But I liked how you phrased that. I don't want to say no, rather, I want to work together to build a solution so that it sort of is a covers both the requirements, right?
Right. And
We
I
are able
always,
to move.
right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying so that we can move forward and at the keeping privacy in mind as well.
A lot of times I tell my PMs, the product folks that I work with, is privacy is a feature, and it's think of it as a product feature, because users are going to uh, end up using the product more because of it, if we market it the right way. And if because users are increasingly more aware of this, and
Correct.
if for example, Apple relies on it heavily, right? Their
Mhm.
marketing is all around
Yes.
how our products are so private. Um, so yeah, that's like a business case as well for privacy. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
once you have trust with a brand, then you would for sure come back, right, to use their products or services.
right, right,
Yeah,
and
you were
then
adding something.
I was adding about privacy by default. That's the other term you mentioned, which is also part of the privacy by design framework. But privacy by default, I would say, is more tied to specific features or specific product. For example,
Oh.
location being off by default is privacy by default, or messages being end-to-end encrypted is privacy by default, or your data getting processed only on device is privacy by default. So these are specific settings that I would
Mhm.
say is privacy by default.
So, how do you use the concepts of privacy by design? Like you highlighted, there are many such sections like privacy by default. How do you use those concepts of privacy by design when you are, um, like, let's say, designing for privacy engineering, or you are speaking with other teams, or you are presenting an idea? How does privacy by design help you with that?
Yeah, so this is as we spoke, it has to be reflected in the privacy engineering or the overall engineering to a large extent. So, f- uh, for example, the review tooling that we discussed is
Hmm.
enabling privacy by design, right? Because there's a framework in place uh, to uh, review and analyze, and then there's this notion of shifting privacy left. So then privacy by design would is something that and would encourage organizations or to have more collaborations or early discussions between product teams and privacy engineers. So now that happens a lot. Once you have that good relation, then product the teams that I had at Snap, for example, good relations with the PMs would come in advance and just, hey, we are thinking about this. Do you see any direct red flags or anything you would want to flag at this point? So that is the ideal thing, in my opinion, when teams come to you at a design phase and just when they're thinking about features.
Hmm.
So uh, and that's where we can have that collaborative space rather than when things are ready and then, oh, but this is not you are violating, this is not how the data should be handled. So then it becomes more in the zone of conflict. So
Right.
when you can get things early in discussion, that's a win for everyone, I think, and for the organization. So
In security also, there is a huge movement of shift left, and I heard that in privacy also we're trying to shift left, so that we start engaging with other teams sooner than later, so there is less rework and the conflict that you said, right? Like if the product, if it is designed and developed, now during the QA cycle you find out that there is a privacy challenge, then you'll have to go back to the drawing board and have that conversation with the other team's leaders, right? So which brings friction. So makes sense to start early when it comes to that dialogue with other teams.
right, yeah.
So when it comes to building like privacy first applications or services, generally organizations utilize privacy enhancing technologies or pets from their toolbox. Maybe for our audience, can you highlight what are pets?
Yeah, so privacy enhancing technologies and pets, as they're called, I feel it's the term has come to include a bunch of technical solutions together in a bucket.
Hmm.
Because the bucket itself is big, right? It's privacy enhancing technologies. So a lot of technologies fall into that bucket.
Hmm.
And it is mainly about providing utility or value from data uh, while preserving privacy, while not compromising on user privacy. So gaining utility from data while maintaining privacy. So that is the high level use, or that is where pets come into play.
Mm-hmm.
At a high level, again, I would divide these technologies in two categories. One is execution privacy, so maintaining privacy while we are operating on private sensitive data. So,
Mm-hmm.
what would come into this bucket is multi party computing, which is a cryptographic technique, then confidential computing, or even end to end encryption. Because while you're sending messages, they are encrypted, or what MPC, multi party computing, again, it's a very fascinating cryptographic primitive. What it helps us do is you and me, or even other parties, we decide that we want to compute this function on data.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say yeah, let's say we want to find who has the maximum salary, or something sensitive, where we don't want to reveal the actual numbers, but we just want an output. So
Right.
MPC allows us to do that computation without revealing anything about the input data, just revealing the output. This is now being explored or used even in machine learning settings, where one entity has a proprietary machine learning model for disease prediction, or in the medical space. Another entity, let's say a hospital, has the sensitive medical records, which would
Mm-hmm.
which maybe we want to train on or have
Okay.
some insights on. So
Mm-hmm.
these are both the things are very private, sensitive, and not
Right.
something people want to share in the clear. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but MPC will enable this computation, so that in the end you have only this trained model.
I love both the examples. The first one was super simple. The second one was a little technical, but yeah, I love both the examples. Yeah, please continue.
So that's on the execution privacy bit, keeping things private or even secure, right, to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
while you
Right.
are operating on them. The second category is output privacy. So when we want to actually release some insights, some statistics, making sure that they
Ah.
are still private. So differential privacy is a big one in that category. In fact, differential privacy has this great property that any output that is differentially private, you can kind of do anything with it. You can post process in any way, it will still maintain its properties. So another one that comes to mind from cryptographic space is zero knowledge proofs, where you are maintaining this output privacy. You are making a statement. Zero knowledge is again a very fascinating technology. That's something I worked on in my PhD as well. So it sounds very magical. It's basically, how can I prove something to you? How can I
Mm-hmm.
prove that I know a secret without actually revealing the secret? Like,
Revealing it.
for example, how can I
Just
prove that I solved, let's say, a very hard Sudoku puzzle? So I want to convince you that I did solve it, but I don't want to give away the
show that.
solution.
Right. Right.
So this is what zero knowledge proofs uh, uh, make possible. So
So, do you have any like? Can you share any successful case studies where pets has been effectively deployed? You gave great examples, but if you have any case studies or anything where it addressed privacy concerns that you can highlight.
yeah, I mean, for differential privacy, for example, the main thing that comes to mind is it's now something that is used for the US census outputs. So all the the release of insights from the US Census reports are now
Mm-hmm.
essentially private. They work with experts, scientists, differential who have expertise in that. So that's a really good step because that's sensitive data about populations, and there are all these uh, demographic cuts which could be sensitive. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good privacy positive place where
Mm-hmm.
this is being used. The other thing, federated learning. That's another thing that is used for autocomplete in your um, on our smartphones. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times in our keyboards we use the autocomplete feature. So
Right.
those models often federated learning is the way that those models are improved so that individual privacy is maintained. Mozilla has a really nice implementation where they worked with a bunch of cryptographers for private aggregation, basically learning some trends, right? How many people are visiting some websites and just understanding some trends, but without revealing like the individual browsing history. So
Right.
they use a design built with secret sharing and in fact some version of zero knowledge proofs. So that's really something at scale, a very exciting implementation. And the last one I'll mention, actually, it's my own research
Mm-hmm.
that has been implemented at scale in WhatsApp, actually.
Oh,
So
lovely.
yeah, so this is WhatsApp has end-to-end encrypted messaging,
Right.
but even to enhance that further, the one of the questions that comes up in end-to-end messaging, even if it is end-to-end encrypted, is how can we be convinced that we are really talking to the right person, right? So, okay,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in my contacts, it's showing up Purushottam, and my messages are end-to-end encrypted to you, but am I really talking to you? So, how can I get that assurance? So
Mm-hmm.
the like basically there's no man in the middle, or I am really
Right.
talking to the person who I think I'm talking to. So this is a kind of an extension of public key infrastructure, and this is again a place where some version of zero knowledge proofs can be used that to maintain this attestation of public keys from each user, which the
Mm-hmm.
other users can verify. And
Right.
this is something WhatsApp recently enabled, I think maybe last year or so, which is based on one of my papers from PhD. So, uh,
Amazing.
so
That's
yeah, so,
amazing.
and especially for like sensitive conversations. Imagine if you are in a war zone, or some you want to reveal a sensitive story to a journalist, then you want to be very very sure that you are talking to the right person. So
Right.
then you have this mechanism of verifying independently and then
Mm-hmm.
initiating that conversation. So
Mm.
that's
So I know that you gave so many examples, but two examples which stuck to me. One is autocomplete. I generally don't think about privacy being a factor in that. I'm just typing some characters. It's just like find me the possible word from dictionary, right? Like something like that. That comes to my mind. But that's amazing to hear that there is like privacy plays a huge role there.
yeah,
The other
because
thing that
so sorry, I'll just add why privacy is important there. Because if you are using something standard, even then, you might
Mhm.
have a specific style of using, certain phrases or certain words, which your keyboard will learn, and you want it to learn because that's your style,
Correct.
and you want.
Correct.
But the other aspect could be, my address is, and you end up say sending that to a bunch of people, so it could have that PII information
Right.
which maybe you want your keyboard to memorize because yeah, you're sending it to a bunch of people, but that's not something that should go into the global model or any
uh,
other place.
Makes sense. And the second example that you gave around WhatsApp, I remember, I think last year when, like a couple of months after it was rolled out, it showed a, I think when I updated, it showed a message that, hey, you can verify the other person. And I was like, why would I need to verify? I know that I'm speaking with Apoorvaa, right? But I see the point, right? In the example that you gave in a war zone, if you want to share a story with someone, or even, oh, let's say if you, like in India particularly nowadays, a lot of organizations have started interacting over WhatsApp, right? That you
Mhm.
can send a WhatsApp message and you can connect with your doctor or something like that. In that case, you would want to be doubly sure that you are sending it to the person you think you are sending before you
Right.
send any health related data. So yeah, that's amazing. And it's amazing that you have written that, as like you have worked on that and it's been rolled out and at that massive scale.
Yeah,
Congratulations to you,
yeah.
honestly.
Thank you. No, it was of course, it's a team effort. It was in fact a paper with all four women authors as well. So that also I'm
Oh
very
wow.
proud of. And yeah, and that work, there have been follow-ups as well by some of the folks at Meta and WhatsApp, and I'm very happy to see that being taken forward and implemented at scale. Yeah, for any researcher, it's really nice to see their
Yeah,
research
yeah,
being used at scale. So
absolutely. So now I want to talk about the other side of the privacy, right? Like as an organization, I have privacy engineering, I have to follow the best practices, I have the pets and things like that. When it comes to the users, it sometimes adds friction to them, right? Like let's say one example could be Apple's app tracking transparency. While it gives power to the users, it disrupted advertisers significantly. So do you have any example of, for our audience, where you see that privacy can add some of this friction to the user experience?
yeah, iOS, I mean, the app tracking transparency, actually, that's a very good topic, and something I've extensively worked on at Snap, specifically, making the ad stack more private at
Hmm.
Snap. So that has been that's an area I've thought about a lot. And what happened, just so that the everyone has we are on the same page on what we're talking about. So I'll share some background on what the app tracking transparency was and how it
Yes.
affected the space. So uh, basically, people with iPhones might remember, or even today, you get these prompts, right? If you install a new app, or even sometimes when an existing app updates, you get this prompt that uh, whether you want to allow the app to track, or uh, you know don't allow.
Locations, yeah, locations, contacts, things like that.
Yeah. No, this is specifically in the context of advertising. So, or
Right,
the prompt specifically asks you if you want to allow the app
right,
to
right.
track you across different sites and websites. So, what that means, or let me start with some history, right, or
Sure.
background. What
Yeah.
happens is all our phones, iPhones as well as Androids, there is a device identifier specifically for advertising. So on
Hmm.
iOS, it's called IDFA, ID for advertising. Android, or on Android, it is Android advertising ID. So the phones already have these, and
Hmm.
that's always been around. And this identifier is has been very important in the ad space generally, because what
Hmm.
happens is when advertisers advertise on social media, they want to learn how their campaigns are doing, right? So let's
Hmm.
say Nike spends a bunch of money to advertise on Snapchat or Instagram. So they want to they want to see how their campaigns are doing. So what that means is they want to see how many people are clicking on the ads on Snapchat or Instagram, and then actually going and buying their shoes, right?
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
and that's how they are going to make their marketing decisions, how they want to spend. So yeah, it makes sense for them to understand these metrics,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's where IDFA or these device identifiers were useful, because let's say you saw an ad for Uber and then
Mm-hmm.
you installed that app, then where you saw the ad, that platform knows your ID, and
Correct.
the, once you installed Uber or you bought something on Nike, that app also knows your uh, ID.
ID. Right.
And that's how you can make that connection, and then learn that okay, this user actually saw an ad and actually then installed the app or did something. And this
Mm-hmm.
is useful information for advertisers. It makes sense that such an ID exists. uh,
Mm-hmm.
but of course users should have a choice in that, whether they want to allow. Earlier it was default yes, and then Apple basically made it default no.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the change that happened. And this default not allowing tracking is, of course, a positive thing for user privacy. But the way it was done was very sudden, and I think it affected small businesses a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, if you make something, a big decision like this, very sudden, it could have in fact, negative effects, because then people might be incentivized to use more invasive identifiers. So
Hmm.
there is risk of making privacy worse off for users. And like that prompt, I mean, in general, this is a challenge, right? How do we communicate things properly to the user, that even if we are doing something that is positive for user privacy, how do we communicate that, or how do we present the choices correctly to the user so that they can actually understand what's in their best interest? So
Right.
that's how it can be. Even those cookie pop-ups that we constantly see, right? Most people find it annoying and they don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So that's really a gap.
No, I totally agree. Like, I'm again drawing parallels with security, right? Like, generally, every website you go to, they would ask you to have complex passwords. Unless you use a password manager, you end up writing it somewhere, which defeats the purpose, right?
Right.
So finding that balance is often key. So, a follow up question to what you highlighted is, how do you find the balance between the user experience and the security without compromising on either?
Yeah, so for this example, something that I worked on extensively, right? And ad space is traditionally, I mean, it's known to be intrusive, right, for
Mm-hmm.
user privacy. Because the first example that comes to mind when we think of user privacy is, these creepy ads that keep tracking
Yeah.
you across internet. In fact, when I talk to some of my friends who are not in the space, or just generally they feel, I sometimes hear this defeated attitude that, oh, there's no privacy anymore. I mean, so I feel that's not great, first of all. And uh, we need to empower people that yes, digital privacy uh, is not only possible, it's your right. And
Right.
we need to have all the organizations uphold it and do a better job there.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically, I mean, in this example that I shared, right, that advertisers might want to learn how their campaigns are performing. So the key insight there is they don't necessarily need to know that Purushottam saw this Uber ad and then installed Uber. They care about general trends or insights, that okay, so many people in
Hmm.
this region saw this ad today and then ended up installing. So this general insights is something we can actually enable through privacy enhancing technologies. So for example, MPC, what I mentioned, there is a specific protocol such as private set intersection size or private join, where you don't have to reveal which person exactly uh, you know did an action, but just understand aggregates. Just it's like
Right.
a private set intersection. So the social media company has a, a set of users who saw an ad, right? They have
Right.
that set, and then the advertiser Uber has the set of Nike has the set of users who actually purchased something.
Purchased it. Yeah.
Then
Right.
we
Right.
just want to find what is the number of users that are in common, uh, and
Hmm.
and then we could also use differential privacy on top of it too, so that the output is not uniquely identifying, or the output is also has that privacy guarantee. So
Hmm.
that's how pets can be useful. uh, so there are technical solutions, but also we need to educate users better to really understand what the choices mean for them.
Right.
uh, and in the ad space especially, right, I've thought
Mm-hmm.
about this a lot. Again, there's a potential to create really this win-win approach, I feel, which I talked about and which I really prescribe to, because
Mm-hmm.
most users understand that, okay, they are using all these free services, so ads are inevitable for a free
Correct.
internet to some extent.
Correct.
And users like, I mean, for me personally, right, if I'm looking for, like, last week I wanted to buy a new bottle, or like a new mug, I was looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you involve the user, that okay, the user is actually looking for something in this space, and then you can maybe show those specific ads, and then it's a win-win because the user is really looking to purchase something around
Right.
that,
Right.
and then you are actually providing value to the user, and
Mm-hmm.
then not showing something that, how did you know that I'm looking for this, or then having that uh, uh, creepiness thought, and then
True.
which erodes the trust. So that's just my opinion, and I think some apps are doing things around those. For example, Snap had this in settings. There's a way to choose like what topics you're interested in, and even Chrome is doing that with topics
Hmm.
API. So there are efforts in this direction. So in general, my view is this is a space where you can involve the user more, be more transparent, and it is just better for everyone.
Right. So, like one of the keywords that you used is like users have choice nowadays, right? Like they can say that, hey, don't track me throughout all the websites I go to, or throughout all the apps, like the Apple's app tracking system. Similarly for other platforms, with more choices, do you feel like there is a decision fatigue that is coming to the users? And how do we design user facing privacy features in a way that empowers them without the decision fatigue coming into play?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, decision fatigue is a big thing. It's in general, I feel, not just in the privacy space. It's just because there's just so much information out there. The information overload inevitably causes that fatigue.
Okay.
Be trying to communicate the most important thing in a friendly way, right?
Hmm.
uh, I mean, there is an extreme where you just try to confuse people, right? I have seen that with a bunch of cookie pop-ups where the choices are really not clear, and even once you make the selection, one of the options is that accept all. I mean, why would I
Correct.
go and choose if I wanted to accept all? So there are extreme examples where the design is made to confuse users. So
Hmm.
at least let's stop that and then make it more friendly for the user to understand, perhaps through a journey or through some sort of gamification. So
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that cookie example, right? Nowadays, any website you go to, if you're going there for the first time, you see three options. We want to accept all, customize, no. Then when you go to customize, like for a user who is not in IT, it's very confusing, right? So yeah, like decision fatigue would definitely come into picture.
yeah, and potentially now generative AI with these agentic solutions, there's potential to enhance user privacy through that, right? Like you uh, you tell your preferences once and for all to you know uh, an agent or some
Right.
entity that sits in your browser, and then that is going to take care. You don't have to do this for every website, so hopefully
Hopefully
that's
soon.
taken care of. Yeah.
Hopefully soon. So speaking of Gen AI, I definitely wanted to touch on that topic. So this year you were in a panel at B-Sides, San Francisco, right, where the topic was around combating Gen AI privacy abuses. And one of the things that you highlighted is LLMs, like large language models, are primarily trained on past data, and sometimes like users have may not have consented for it. One of the like recent example is like LinkedIn has started training on all the users data, and by default it's enabled. You can go and disable it, but by default they are using it for training. Uh, so where do you see the biggest privacy vulnerabilities in today's Gen AI era?
Yeah, the main thing, as you pointed out, right, in Gen AI or these huge language models, is basically the amounts of data that is needed for training. And then uh, we don't completely understand how that those massive amounts of data are actually reflected in the outputs, are actually part of the usage of
Hmm.
uh, LLMs, right? For example, the biggest privacy risk or vulnerability that you might have heard is called memorization, right? Which is essentially that LLMs are known to memorize training data verbatim and
Hmm.
then spit it out in a query response. So, for example, if the training data contains something like Alice, lives in Santa Monica and her address or phone number is something,
Hmm.
it's possible that the LLM completely memorizes that exact thing.
And
And
spits it out.
yeah, and in fact, there have been a lot of attacks that demonstrate this. A very and we really don't understand how uh, LLMs work, because this attack, which I think there was a paper last year or maybe earlier this year, how ChatGPT was attacked, and the prompt was pretty bizarre. They kept prompting it one single word, poem, and they kept prompting it for many times. And I think the prompt was something like, keep outputting the word poem uh,
Hmm.
as many times as you can, and eventually the LLM spit out some PII, some email address,
Oh.
so it's really bizarre. We really don't understand
Hmm.
how uh, LLMs can output any of the data that
Yeah.
they are trained with. So we have to be extra very careful around what data is used for training, and
Hmm.
that's really the big vulnerability. The other is also membership inference attacks, like trying to find out if a certain piece of data or a certain sample was used in training a model. uh, More than LLMs, this is problematic for specific medical applications, let's say. So
Ah.
you shouldn't be able to figure out if someone's sample was in the training data, that is, if
True.
someone really had a particular disease. So that's again very sensitive uh, attack.
Information, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah, True. So
Um,
let's say if as an organization, I'm using some data to train. You highlighted some of the vulnerabilities, right? Somebody can uh, use prompts to maybe get into the memory and get that information, sensitive information at sometimes. What other risks do you see organizations might face if they do not like either build their own models properly, or they're using an external model and they're feeding their context and things like that? When you're building AI powered features, what other risks do you see organizations might face?
yeah, so in terms of risks, basically, uh, having some data sanitization is very important, and
Mm,
basically having a good handle on your data, what is going into training, what is the lineage of that data, how are you sourcing that data, how are you processing that data before you send it for training. Then even the training process itself, uh, there are ways in which that can be more private. Are you thinking about that? Once the model is trained, what kind of testing are you doing? This is again a new evolving space which organizations should invest in once their models are ready to be deployed. Having some privacy testing in place. It's similar
mm,
to pen testing. I think this privacy test suites is also something that is going to evolve and something organizations should invest in.
mhm,
Uh, then thinking about even the uh, inference chain, right? Can that be made more secure? Uh, there are
mm.
some works around that the complete query and the response flow is, let's say, encrypted or within a confidential compute, so users have that additional guarantee about how their sensitive queries are being processed. Those are a few things. Also, regulations are um, moving pretty fast in the AI space. So
Right.
staying up to date, the EU AI Act to some extent is talking about how your training data needs to be annotated, or there needs to be proper lineage around it. Similarly, there
Mm.
are some new laws being enacted within in California as well, which are along these lines.
So I think some of the things that you highlighted are part of the privacy enhancing technologies that should be followed, right? On top of many other things, but one of the things that maybe we touched on slightly earlier is many of these pets are reactive, solving like existing privacy concerns. How do you see pets evolving in next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I see a lot of investments or research already in place, and there's, of course, potential for more interesting things coming out. And right now, it's really a good time to think about this because these are open-ended problems. These are not solved. This is not like encryption. We have, encryption is standardized for so many years. We know
Right.
the right key sizes. Everything is pretty standardized. Whereas in generative AI or generally AI privacy space, a lot of problems are very, very uh, nascent, open-ended, which makes it
Correct.
exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And also the right time to think about it. Like even using something like differential privacy, which is now kind of established as a mathematical framework, but how do you apply those techniques in training models? That's again, you know, a ripe area of research because each setting is slightly different, and then there's a lot that can be explored there. The test suites that I talked about, there's a lot of potential to keep thinking about it, innovating in that space. Uh, Even within crypto, fully homomorphic encryption is another thing I'm very excited about, becoming very, very efficient. I mean, of course, FHE is established and things are, progressing, and it is at a stage where it is feasible, but
Mm-hmm.
not scalable. So
Mm.
that's something I'm excited about. There's a startup called Zama, which is heavily working on this. um, and they are trying to innovate at the chip level, in fact, making
Oh wow.
FH very, very efficient. So that's something I'm excited about. Other very interesting line of work, which I'm also again very excited about, is called machine unlearning, which again seems
Ah.
very magical. That uh, once the machine, once a model has learned something, how do we make it forget something? This has a bunch of application. Let's say we want to delete something, or given that the training process itself for LLMs is so huge and expensive, we want
Hmm.
to avoid retraining things. So, is there a way we can edit out or make the model forget certain aspects of the data that it has trained? And it's a fascinating area of research. We don't have great solutions as of now, but I'm optimistic, hopeful that some cool ideas, some research will emerge in that space. So I think there's a bright future for pets, and we all can together be proactive about it. So it's a very exciting area, and I'll encourage more people to think about these problems. It's a very interesting space.
Hmm. So I think unlearning. I had not thought about that much, but I can see the point, right? Like if you have spent millions in training, and if there was a some incorrect data set or something like that, and you might want to take that out of the memory, it would be very valuable. One of the keywords that you touched on is proactive, right? Do you see any proactive privacy solutions, like close to becoming uh, um, close to being available to everyone? Any proactive privacy solutions?
Yeah, so these are the ones I mentioned. These are probably still under development phase, and
Hmm.
uh, yeah, but soon enough, I think it will reach folks. Models, or in terms of just the proactive approaches of sanitizing data sets, those are
Hmm.
being already used to a large extent. Basic, at least PII filtering, that's something that has been standardized. Then maybe use of synthetic data, that's
Hmm.
again another thing that is becoming pretty mainstream right now. And then, yeah, the other things are on their way to becoming mainstream, I would say.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I read somewhere that maybe OpenAI was trying to invest to generate synthetic data for their own like model training. Maybe earlier this year. I don't know, like if they have done it, like they are able to generate synthetic data and use that for training. But like I had read something around that. So hopefully
Yeah,
that
I
happens.
don't think I read the exact news, but I'm sure synthetic data is an area that everyone is investing in. And again, it's a very privacy positive thing that we're not
Correct.
using raw data.
Any PII or anything like. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would assume most tech companies are investing in this, which is really a privacy positive uh, step.
Initiative. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So with that, we come to the end of the security questions. we had reached out to some of our common friends, and we have some questions from them. The first question is from Trupti Shiralkar.
Mhm.
What are your views about striking balance between security, privacy, developer productivity, and experience?
Yeah, I mean, as we discussed, right, there are real trade-offs, and I think communication is key, of course, involving all the stakeholders from the beginning, so there are no surprises. So communication is really the key, and then just having this win-win positive sum approach being part of organizational culture, that we are together solving something that is going to be better for the company, rather than you know security versus product, or privacy versus product end. So having that collaborative mindset, and a company that fosters it, that's important. And
Hmm.
sometimes, yeah, the business is going to make a decision that uh, privacy won't like, or sometimes the leadership is going to side with security, which the product won't like. So that's going
Right.
to happen, and that's part of the game. It's this concept of infinite game, right? It's important to keep playing that game, and you'll have different outcomes every time. But the important thing is everyone has a seat at the table, especially privacy
Hmm.
security have a prime seat at the table at the decision making. And then you know uh, then everyone should be happy with the fact that yes, everyone's views were seriously considered, and then we reached a solution that was best at that point of time for the company.
Makes a lot of sense. The next question is, one of the key statistics which was presented this year at Gartner Security Conference was that around 73% of CISOs and security leaders in US feel burnout at some level in their work life. What's your take on this, and how do you handle stress? Any tips for other security leaders or security engineers?
Yeah, I mean, burnout is real. I personally feel, I mean, in my experience, if I'm working on things that I'm really passionate about and driven by, then that gives me more energy, and I kind of keeps me away from burnout to some
Hmm.
extent. But the reason, I mean, I can definitely see this happening, especially in privacy and security space, because a lot of our work can be reactive. Especially, we didn't touch upon incidents, but if and
Right.
when incidents happen, then that can be really stressful, and you know it's a crisis management. So it's definitely part of it, is going to happen at some point. I think personally I try to balance it out always with things that I really enjoy and am driven by. I like to in fact take that initiative often, to do projects or pitch things that are exciting and that would be great for the organization. So if you are driving something that you are excited about, and that the your leadership and company believes is good for the company, then uh, that can be uh, an
That's a
enhancer
good tip.
with
Yeah, that's
that
a very good tip.
thing.
It's like you're doing a uh, side project which gives you joy, right? And it's if it is related to your work, then that helps you balance some of the burnout aspects.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so with that we come to the end of the podcast, but before I let you go, one last question is, do you have any recommendation, like reading recommendation for our audience? It can be a blog or a book or podcast or anything, a research paper, let's say, anything that you have for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, since we were talking about this burnout aspect, or in general, I mean, one of the podcasts that I like to listen to is, Big Think by Adam Grant. It's more
Hmm.
about uh, just thinking of work more holistically, and he has invites guests from all different spaces. sometimes tech, politics, and it's a good discussion generally how to approach work and so on. And my other pet project, pun intended, is just even to understand how living a multidimensional life helps us,
Hmm.
right? As I mentioned, like doing things that you are really passionate about, whether it's at work or even outside of that, really gives you a lot of energy and positivity in general in life. For example, I'm also a musician. I perform a
Oh,
lot, and that's a really important aspect of my life. I'm also a parent. I have two kids, and I'm a privacy techie, and I'm passionate about all these three things, and all of these identities together define me, make me better. So that's I'm reading a lot about this, and in fact I would like to plug my own blog newsletter, which
please.
I've recently started to explore these topics, at how to have a multidimensional identity and how it helps us in our professional careers as well. So it's called polypaths. That's the
Uh,
term I have come up with. A polypath is someone who likes to pursue different paths in life and grows, excels at multiple things to have a holistic identity. So I'm really passionate about that. I would encourage the audience to check it out. Polypaths. It's on Substack, and yeah, do subscribe if the content resonates with you. So
Yeah.
that would be my
Thank you.
message.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So generally, what we do is the recommendations we tag them when we publish the episode. So we will do that as well. Polypaths and the podcast that you highlighted will definitely do that.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Purushottam, for having me. This was a really fun chat, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was lovely to have you as well on the podcast. So there were many things that I was not aware of, or even I was not thinking it from that lens. Thank you for like and especially some of the examples that you gave were very close to were not very technical, some of them, which made it easy to understand. So yeah, thank you so much for doing that and coming to the podcast as well.
Thank you, and thank you for having this podcast. I've seen other episodes as well, so this is a really nice community contribution. I think so. It's kudos to you and your team.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words. And to our audience, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next episode.